It happens every February,
Oh, yeah. Every single year.
You start a fresh, read the Bible in a year plan.
Right. The classic New Year's resolution.
Exactly. And you breeze through the family drama of Genesis. You get completely swept up in the high-stakes escapes, the parting of the Red Sea and Exodus.
It's super engaging.
It is. But then, without fail, you hit a total brick wall.
Ah, yes. The Book of Leviticus.
Yes. Suddenly, you are reading this brutally dry ancient manual about, skin diseases and mildew on walls and exactly which internal organs of a goat you're supposed to burn.
It is notoriously the graveyard of good reading intentions.
It really is.
Yeah.
So welcome to today's deep dive. But before we jump into deciphering that ancient manual, I just want to offer a really warm welcome to you, the listener.
We're so glad you're joining us.
We really are. May your day be incredibly blessed, and may the entire week ahead bring you a deep sense of peace, purpose, and clarity in whatever you're facing right now.
Beautifully said.
Thanks. So, our mission today is to tackle that February brick wall. We're pulling insights from the introductions of two highly regarded study resources, the Holman and the NAA Study Bibles.
Right. Both really solid, detailed sources.
And the goal here is to see if we've basically been miscategorizing Leviticus this whole time. What if instead of a dry legal document, we are actually reading ancient, gritty, utopian literature?
Which is such a wild concept, right? Because we usually think of a utopia as this flawless, pristine society where nothing goes wrong.
Yeah, exactly. White togas, marble buildings, perfect weather.
Right. But the framework we're looking at today redefines that entirely. According to our sources, Leviticus is actually a highly realistic blueprint for a community where the creator of the universe, like the ultimate infinitely holy being, physically moves into the neighborhood.
Wow. Physically moves in.
Yeah. It answers the logistical question of how a human community survives and thrives when perfection literally pitches a tent in their backyard.
That just changes the whole vibe of the book immediately.
It really does.
So if we want to understand the why behind all these super strange laws, we really have to look at the massive logistical problem the Israelites were facing.
Context is everything here.
Right. So let's set the scene based on the timeline. The Israelites are camped at Mount Sinai. It's been about a year since they escaped slavery in Egypt.
Hopefully a year, yeah.
And the events detailed in Leviticus, they don't span decades, right? This entire book covers less than a month. It sits exactly between the end of Exodus and the beginning of Numbers.
And that transition from Exodus is the absolute key to everything.
How so?
Well, at the very end of Exodus, the Israelites finish building the tabernacle.
That's the big tent, right?
Exactly, this massive, elaborate, portable temple. And at the end of the book, the glory of the Lord descends and physically fills that space.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So God is no longer just this distant voice rumbling on a smoking mountain. He is now a resident. He's dwelling right there in the dead center of their camp.
Okay, and bringing a perfectly holy, infinitely pure God into a camp of flawed, sinful humans, that creates an immediate crisis.
A massive crisis.
I was reading this and I thought, think about it like bringing the actual physical sun down into a wooden house.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Right. If you bring the sun into a wooden house, the house is going to instantly incinerate. Not because the sun is angry or, malicious.
Right. It's just doing what the sun does.
Exactly. It's just the sheer nature of what the sun is. It's too intense. It's too hot, too pure. So the big question is, how do you keep the wooden house from burning down?
Well, you have to fireproof the house.
Fireproof it. Okay.
Yeah. Leviticus essentially serves as that fireproofing manual. Our sources show that for God to safely remain in the camp without destroying it, the people have to maintain holy character and ceremonial purity.
So it's not just arbitrary rules.
Not at all. The text treats the presence of God as this beautiful, incredible blessing, but also an exceptionally dangerous reality if it's approached casually.
Because it's the sun.
Exactly. So the decrees in Leviticus instruct the people on how to regulate this proximity through very specific purification rituals.
Okay, so if the goal is keeping the wooden house from catching fire, the Israelites had to constantly monitor their status, right? The text divides this into clean and unclean states.
Yes, the clean and unclean laws.
And here's where modern readers, myself included, just stumble so hard. Because when we hear the word unclean today, our 21st century brains immediately jump to germs.
Germs, hygiene, physical dirt.
Right. We think, oh, they need a shower, or they didn't wash their hands before dinner.
And that assumption fundamentally distorts the text.
Really?
Yeah, completely. Because clean and unclean in this ancient context, they are strictly ceremonial terms.
Okay.
They refer to ritual states. They have absolutely nothing to do with hygiene. In the ancient Israelite worldview, impurity involved departures from what was considered the normal, whole physical state.
So what does that mean practically? What makes you unclean?
Well, contracting certain skin diseases, or experiencing various bodily fluids, or even consuming restricted foods.
Like the dietary laws.
Right. Doing those things temporarily disrupted the normal whole state of the body.
And there's a symbolic weight to those disruptions too, right? The Holman notes bring this up. Impurity often represented or symbolized death, or at least the breakdown of the physical body.
Yes, the forces of mortality.
On the flip side, holiness and God himself represented ultimate life, order, and wholeness.
Yeah, exactly. So these ritual categories were essentially a daily physical theology.
Physical theology, I like that.
Yeah, they mapped the huge abstract concepts of life and death onto everyday, ordinary actions.
The NAA Study Bible offers this brilliant analogy that clarified this entirely for me.
Oh, the voter registration one.
Yes. It says being ceremonially clean or unclean has nothing to do with being morally good or bad. It operates exactly like being registered to vote versus not registered to vote.
It's such a helpful way to think about it.
Right. Because, if your voter registration expires, you, the listener, you haven't committed a moral crime.
Right, the police aren't coming for you.
Exactly. You aren't suddenly an evil person. It simply means you temporarily lack the proper status to participate in a very specific civic action, like going to the polling booth.
And that framework applies perfectly to the ancient tabernacle.
Wow.
Becoming unclean wasn't inherently a sin. You didn't sin by having a baby or getting a rash.
Right.
It just meant your quote-unquote registration to enter the holy space and participate in a temple sacrifice was temporarily suspended.
So you just couldn't approach the presence of God.
Right. You couldn't approach the holy zone until you went through the waiting period or the washing process to restore that status.
Okay. But, and I think a lot of people wonder this, why make them jump through all these daily hoops?
What do you mean?
Well, if it's not a sin to be unclean, why regulate what they touch and eat and wear so strictly? Like, why the micromanagement?
That's a great question. According to the sources, it acts as this really intense pedagogical training program.
Like an object lesson.
Basically,
Yeah.
God represents the absolute highest level of moral purity. By constantly having to deal with these daily physical rituals of purity, the Israelites were being conditioned. They were trained to remain hyper-aware of their actions.
Ah, so it builds a habit.
Exactly. Think about it. If you have to pause and consider God's holiness every single time you prepare a meal or wash your clothes or go about your day, that mindfulness naturally bleeds into other areas.
It changes how you live.
Right. It bleeds into how you treat your neighbor, how you conduct your business, how you dispense justice in the courts. The physical habits were tangible reminders pointing toward the necessity of moral purity in absolutely every aspect of life.
But wait, maintaining perfect ceremonial cleanliness, like 24/7 in a dusty ancient desert camp, that's impossible.
Completely impossible.
Yeah. Right. Human error is inevitable. People are going to mess up, their registrations are going to lapse, and let's be real, sometimes they are going to commit actual moral sins.
Yes, they are.
So the wood of the house is going to start smoking, to use our analogy. What's the fail-safe here? How is the relationship repaired before the sun incinerates the house, or God just packs up and leaves the camp entirely?
The fail-safe is where we get into the heavy stuff. It requires mediation and sacrifice.
Ah, the sacrifices, the part everyone skips.
Right. But Leviticus outlines 5 major offerings to repair these breaches in the relationship. And understanding how they function is crucial.
Okay, let's break them down.
So 3 of them were completely voluntary. First, you have the burnt offering.
And that one's totally burned up, right?
Yes. Entirely consumed by fire on the altar. It represented a worshiper's complete, unreserved surrender and dedication to God.
Okay, makes sense. What's next?
Then there's the grain offering. This is interesting because it's the only non-animal sacrifice of the 5.
Oh, just grain and oil and stuff?
Exactly. It functioned as a tribute, basically acknowledging God's provision and giving back a portion of the harvest.
Got it. And the third voluntary one?
That's the fellowship or peace offering.
I found this one fascinating in the reading.
It really is. Because with the fellowship offering, only the fat was burned on the altar.
And the rest of it?
The meat was actually cooked and eaten by the worshiper, their family, and the priests.
So it's basically a sacred barbecue.
That's exactly what it is. It's a communal meal shared right there in the presence of God. It was a way to celebrate a repaired, or a really healthy relationship with the divine.
Okay, so those three focus on worship and dedication, but there were mandatory ones too, right?
Yes, the two mandatory offerings focus strictly on contamination and human failure.
When things go wrong.
Right. You have the sin offering, which the sources point out is probably better translated as a purification offering.
Because it purifies the tabernacle.
Exactly. It was designed to decontaminate the sanctuary from the metaphysical pollution that human sin caused.
Like cleaning up a spiritual oil spill.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And finally, you have the guilt or restitution offering. This dealt with very specific instances of theft or fraud or property damage.
And this one wasn't just a ritual, right?
No, not at all. You couldn't just offer an animal and walk away. You had to actually pay back the person you wronged,
Full restitution.
plus an extra 20% penalty on top of it. You had to make it right with your neighbor before you could even bring the sacrifice to God.
Wow, so there's real accountability there. And all of these offerings, they revolve around this specific Hebrew word, right? Kippur.
Yes, kippur, which we usually translate in English as atonement.
So what does atonement actually mean in this context?
Well, kippur essentially means to cover or to appease or to reconcile two alienated parties.
Okay.
The whole theological reality of Leviticus is that God is the offended party when sin occurs. Sin and impurity are a direct affront to his holy nature.
It's an insult to the Son.
Right. So atonement is this gracious mechanism that God provides to cover or repair that offense so the relationship can actually continue.
But wait, if I'm just an average Israelite, I can't just stroll into the tabernacle with a goat to fix my own impurity, right?
No, absolutely not.
Because that sun in the house danger is way too high for a layman to navigate safely.
It would be lethal, which is exactly why chapters 8 through 10 suddenly shift the focus entirely.
To the priests.
Exactly. To building a priesthood. Aaron and his sons are designated as the exclusive mediators for the whole camp.
So they're like the hazmat team.
That's practically what they are. They are the only ones authorized to safely navigate that holy zone, to intercede for the people, and to physically apply the blood of the sacrifices to the altar.
And they were supported by the broader tribe, right? The Levites.
Yes, the Levites handled all the heavy lifting and the logistics of taking down and moving the tabernacle when they traveled.
Oh, and actually, isn't that where the book gets its name?
Yes. The Greek Septuagint named the book Leviticus, which literally means relating to the Levites or the Levitical priesthood.
Okay, here is where I really struggle with the way this is all laid out in the text. And the NAA source highlights this paradox perfectly.
What's the paradox?
Well, Leviticus gives incredibly minute instructions on how to perform these rituals, right?
Very detailed, yes.
It dictates exactly which pieces of fat to burn, how many times to sprinkle the blood, exactly where to wipe it on the altar, but it rarely explains what the rituals actually mean.
That's true. It's heavy on the how, light on the why.
Right. So if the average worshiper isn't told the symbolic meaning behind slaughtering the animal, how is this not just empty magic?
Empty magic.
Yeah. How is it any different from a pagan spell where you just chant the right incantation, burn the right goat, and force a deity to do what you want?
I see what you mean. Well, the distinction between Israelite worship and pagan magic lies in two really crucial details that our sources point out.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, the Holman study notes explicitly state that these rituals were fundamentally useless without the correct internal posture.
So you had to actually mean it.
Exactly. The sacrifices demanded genuine repentance. You had to actively confess your sins over the animal.
It couldn't just be a transaction.
No. And the prophets, later on in the Hebrew Bible, make it overwhelmingly clear that God actually despises sacrifices if the worshiper's heart is corrupt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the physical motion meant absolutely nothing without the internal reality of repentance.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the second detail?
The second detail is that while Leviticus rarely explains the why, there is one single moment where it pulls back the curtain.
Just one.
Just one major one. And that single explanation basically unlocks the logic of the entire sacrificial system.
I know exactly the verse you're talking about. Leviticus chapter 17, verse 11.
One.
It says, "For the life of a creature is in the blood, and I have given it to you to make atonement for yourselves on the altar. It is the blood that makes atonement for one's life."
Yes, the life is in the blood. In this ancient framework, blood is the visible, tangible symbol of life itself.
Right.
And remember our earlier discussion about clean and unclean. Impurity and sin introduce the forces of death into the community.
Yeah, the breakdown of the body, mortality.
Exactly. So the only way to counter death, the only way to cover or kipper that metaphysical pollution is with life.
So when an animal is sacrificed, it is not about God being like thirsty for blood in some gruesome, primitive way.
Not at all. That's a huge misconception. It is entirely about substitution.
Substitution.
Yes. The animal's life is surrendered to cover the human's debt of death. That exchanged life for death is what cleanses the sanctuary. It's what allows the holy God to remain among an unholy people without destroying them.
Wow. That is a really heavy reality to sit with.
It is very sobering.
It takes a moment to process how visceral and serious that ancient worldview really was.
It wasn't taken lightly, that's for sure.
But, once we grasp that underlying logic of life and death, we can actually sort of pan the camera out and look at the broader structure of Leviticus.
The big picture.
Right. Because historically, readers have a habit of chopping the book cleanly in half.
Oh, yeah. We love to compartmentalize things.
We do. They look at chapters 1 through 16, and they categorize them as the ritual laws. The priests, the blood, the Day of Atonement.
The church stuff, basically.
Exactly. And then they look at the second half, chapters 17 through 27, which is widely known as the Holiness Code, and they categorize those as the moral laws.
The civic stuff.
Yeah.
Because the Holiness Code deals with things like how to treat the poor, how to run a fair agricultural calendar, and ensuring you have honest weights and measures in the marketplace.
But the sources tell us that imposing that modern division is a huge mistake.
It really is.
From the perspective of the text itself, there is zero separation between burning a grain offering on an altar and paying your workers a fair wage at the end of the day.
They are completely intertwined.
Both sections are equally focused on the exact same goal: the total devotion of Israel to the Lord.
And it's all written as oracular law, right?
Yes. The phrase, "the Lord spoke to Moses," appears over 30 times.
So this isn't just a human committee drafting up legislation.
No, it's the divine voice structuring their entire reality.
Which brings us right back to that idea we started with, utopian literature. The entire book is detailing an ideal society living in perfect rhythm with a divine presence.
Okay, I have to push back on the word utopia here.
Oh, why is that?
Well, when you and I think of a utopia, we imagine a pristine, flawless world where no one ever gets sick and absolutely nothing goes wrong.
Sure, a perfect paradise.
But Leviticus includes detailed multi-step instructions on what to do when you find terrifying spreading mold on the walls of your own house.
Yes, the dreaded mildew laws.
Right, and it legislates what happens when someone steals from their neighbor, or when highly infectious skin diseases break out in the camp. I mean, a society dealing with moldy walls and theft doesn't exactly sound like a utopia to me.
And that is precisely the genius of Leviticus.
Really?
Yeah. It doesn't present a sterile, impossible fantasy. It offers gritty realism.
Gritty realism.
Think about it. Imagine the genuine human terror of living in the ancient world, before modern medicine, and discovering a spreading contamination in your home.
It would be terrifying.
And realizing you might have to literally dismantle your house, stone by stone, just to stop it from infecting the whole community.
It really acknowledges the profound vulnerability of ancient life, doesn't it?
It does. It is a utopia, not because tragedy and mess are miraculously absent, but because God provides a highly systematic, reliable structure of grace to deal with them.
A structure of grace. I love that phrasing.
When human error, or natural disease, or moral sin shatters the peace of the camp, Leviticus steps in and offers a concrete path back to restoration.
It tells them exactly what to do.
Yes, it gives them order in a very chaotic world. It's a way to put the pieces back together and restore communion with God and with their neighbors.
That completely reframes the entire book for me. It takes it from being this oppressive, naggy rule book into a literal safety net.
Exactly. It's a net of grace.
But as we look at all of this, we have to land on the ultimate relevance for today.
The so what factor.
Right, because the ancient nation-state of Israel at Mount Sinai is gone. The physical tabernacle is gone. The temple in Jerusalem was destroyed millennia ago.
Long gone.
So why should someone listening to us right now, commuting to work or folding laundry, care about an ancient fireproofing manual?
It's a fair question. And the relevance really operates on three distinct levels. First, we have to address the literal sacrificial system we spent so much time on.
Right. Why aren't we sacrificing goats today?
Well, for Christian theology, particularly as it's outlined in the New Testament book of Hebrews, the physical observance of the Levitical priesthood and animal sacrifice is entirely obsolete.
Because it served its purpose and it was fulfilled.
Correct. The sources highlight that the ancient sacrifices were shadows. They were pointing forward to a permanent reality. Christian theology views the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ as the ultimate final sacrifice.
So he is the final atonement.
Yes, his expiatory death accomplished permanently what the blood of animals could only achieve temporarily. The mechanism of atonement was eternally satisfied on the cross.
So we don't need to build altars anymore.
No altars required.
But the book isn't just discarded history, right?
Far from it. Because on a second level, Leviticus fundamentally shaped the modern liturgical calendar.
Oh, the festivals.
Yes, chapter 23 outlines all the major Jewish festivals. Passover, first fruits, the Feast of Weeks. And you honestly cannot comprehend the timeline or the theological weight of the New Testament without them.
How do they connect?
Well, Jesus' death occurred during Passover, right? That maps directly onto the sacrifice of the Passover lamb.
Okay, wow.
And then the resurrection occurred on the festival of first fruits.
That makes so much sense.
And the Holy Spirit arrived on Pentecost, which is the Greek name for the Feast of Weeks. The entire Christian calendar is built straight on the architecture of Leviticus.
That is amazing. And what's the third level of relevance?
The third level is the enduring nature of the moral law. While the ceremonial rituals of clean and unclean are obsolete, the call to moral holiness still remains.
The Holiness Code.
Right. The New Testament constantly quotes the Holiness Code. The Apostle Peter's famous command, "Be holy because I am holy," is lifted straight out of Leviticus chapter 11.
You know, that leads to the biggest revelation for me in this entire deep dive. It was regarding the greatest commandments.
Oh, this is so good.
We all know Jesus said the greatest command is to love the Lord your God. And when he was asked for the second greatest, he said, love your neighbor as yourself.
The golden rule, essentially.
Right. And I always subconsciously assumed that Jesus just coined that phrase in the moment. Like he was introducing this revolutionary, gentle New Testament concept.
A lot of people think that.
But he wasn't inventing it. He was quoting Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18, absolutely word for word.
The most famous ethical command in human history, the command to love your neighbor, is actually the beating heart of this supposedly dry, ancient legal code.
It is just astounding. When you synthesize all of this, Leviticus isn't just some historical artifact. It provides the essential vocabulary for the rest of the Bible.
It is the grammar of salvation.
Yes. You cannot grasp the weight of the word sacrifice or the mechanics of atonement or the depth of the cross without the framework established right there at the base of Mount Sinai.
If you skip Leviticus, you lose the dictionary. You need to read the rest of the story.
It taught humanity the mechanics of living in the presence of the Son, which leaves us with a final thought to ponder today.
Something for the listeners to take with them.
Exactly. We've seen how Leviticus structured literally every single facet of ancient life. The agricultural calendar, the diet, the clothing, the economy. It was all structured around the physical presence of God at the very center of the camp.
Everything radiated outward from that center.
Everything. So if you were to look at your own life right now, if you were to map out your time, your resources, your mental energy, your daily habits, what is sitting at the center of your camp?
That's a great question.
What is the thing dictating your daily rhythms? Because whatever occupies that central space, you will inevitably build your entire life around trying to keep it there.
Wow. That's a powerful thought to end on.
Thank you so much for exploring this ancient blueprint with us today. God blesses all of you listening, and we really hope you carry these insights into your week. Until next time.